If you haven't heard of Olive Wagyu, you're not alone. This particular type of beef has eluded even the most informed aficionados. Hey people, welcome to Luxury Royale. In today's video, we'll be talking about the Olive Wagyu, which is the rarest steak in the world. But before we start, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on our post notifications to keep up with our content. Alright, let's dive in. The Olive Wagyu is considered to be the rarest steak in the world, with only about 2,200 heads of this specific cattle existing in the entire world. On top of that, just a small number of it are harvested every month for its meat. The story of Olive Wagyu is very interesting. The cattle farmers on Shodoshima Island and on the Kagawa mainland were struggling in the early 2000s. They produced beef as good as any Kobe, but the world had no market for them as their farms were just too far away from the ports to be shipped. But by the year 2006, all that started to change, because that was the year a cattle farmer on Shodoshima called Masaki Ishii began trying out different methods of toasting the leftover olive pulp from olive oil production on the island. He had an intuition that if he could get his handful of cows to eat the olives, the healthy oleic acid which the fruits are known for might get into the meat, carrying its great health benefits. So at first, he tried feeding one of his cows the raw olive pulp, but no use, and the cows refused as it was bitter. Next, he innovated, doing an old technique of drying persimmons by air in the sea breezes. The farmer lay out the olive leaves out on the rocks by the shore and waited them to toast in the breeze and sun. It took 3 years to perfect this technique. The slow-toasted olives, when completely drawn, were sweet, malty, and delectable, and the cows loved it. And when the farmer harvested those first olive-fed Wagyu cattle, he found that something amazing had happened to the meat. It was better than any other Japanese Wagyu, including Kobe, and higher in monosaturated oleic acid and richer in umami flavor. Since then, raised in Japan's Kagawa nature, these cows are fed a special diet of inawara rice straw, Italian ryegrass, and pressed olive pulp. The olive pulp is what adds to the richness in the beef's taste. This is because of the umami flavor, as mentioned earlier, which is the result of the increased amount of peptides and glutamic acid, and a high level of oleic acid. The monosaturated fat contributes to about 65.2% of Olive Wagyu's fat content, which is higher than any other beef in the world, and is what gives steak the desired soft, melt-in-your-mouth texture. This amazing marbling is also what led this kind of meat to win the award for Best Fat Quality at the 2017 Wagyu Olympics, beating out 182 other competitors. Wagyu is basically rated on two main factors: on how much meat can be yielded and the quality of the marbled fat. Only A3 to A5 rated Wagyu is allowed for sale in Japan, and the higher the grade, the more the price for the beef. Wagyu beef has attained almost legendary status, and there are many myths about Wagyu farms and the way the animals are treated, from getting daily massages to being fed beer, but most of these often aren't true. The cows are raised and reared much differently in every region and by different farmers, but they're often raised by a breeder until they're around 10 months old, and then sold for an auction to a fattening farmer. By the time the calves are put up for sale at auction, they can already get 40 times the price of US cattle. The fattening farm will raise the cattle in small pens and feed them a mixture of fiber and high-energy concentrate made from rice, wheat, and hay. They're generally fed this thrice a day for almost 2 years, until the animals are at least 50% fat. Only the pregnant cows and breeding cattle are permitted to graze on pasture. The length of the fattening process and the import prices of the large quantity of concentrated feed increases the price of the beef, and over this fattening period, each cow would have eaten 5 tons of feed. When a grown cow goes to auction, it can sell for as much as $30,000. Due to its limited production over the years, Olive Wagyu is hard to find in Japan, let alone the United States. But the scarcity has recently changed. For the first time ever, Olive Wagyu was to be sold directly to customers in the US by Crowd Cow. This online service connects customers with small farms, and thus promising pasture-raised, hormone-free meat and highlighting the best of what independent ranchers have to offer. But what really makes the firm a successful startup story are its impressive practices. With the combination of efforts supporting sustainable breeders, transparency of where the meat comes from, the ease of ordering with the click of a button, the ability to choose exactly which cuts and the quantity, a commitment to quality, delivery straight to a buyer's door, and prices comparable to local butcher shops, it's very clear why their steaks sell out very quickly. Since its beginning, Crowd Cow's also expanded their offerings to chicken and pork, meeting the additional needs of their customers. The word Wagyu literally translates to Japanese cow. There are around 300 brands of Wagyu, including Miyazaki, Kagashima, and the most famous beef among all of them is Kobe. And then we have Olive Wagyu. Olive Wagyu is now known as a brand of Wagyu that comes from cattle raised on a small Japanese island called Shodoshima that's famous for its olive oil industry. Joe Heitzberg, the founder of Crowd Cow, tells the story of the origin of the beef in the company's website too. He went to olive oil makers, took the olive peels and toasted them so they became sweeter, and mixed it with rice straw, barley, grains, and the cows loved it, Heitzberg said. He shared the recipe with other farmers in the area, and they all bought in and started doing it. As mentioned earlier, because of the cow's diet, Olive Wagyu is highly marbled with fat that's a light yellow color, and it gives a flavor profile so unique that the meat beat out 182 others for the best fat quality category at the 2017 Wagyu Olympics, which is a 6-day contest that takes place every 5 years. Beef production from all over Japan bring in their finest cuts. Because of its origin, this beef is also very scarce. Heitzberg says last year about 2,200 heads of Olive Wagyu were harvested, with a tiny fraction of that being exported. Now, there are 70 producers raising Olive Wagyu cattle, with the largest having just 300 head of cattle. Heitzberg says Ishii initially had just 12. According to Heitzberg, even in Japan, if you go to a Tokyo restaurant for high-end steaks, there's a coin-toss chance they've even heard about it. It's on the cutting edge of beef geekery. George Owen, who's the executive director of the American Wagyu Association, hasn't even tasted the beef. He says that it's not in his budget and that he can't afford the stuff. To be entirely honest, it's true. When available in market, Crowd Cow sells a 16-ounce A5 Olive Wagyu ribeye steak on its website for around $240, and that's when the beef is most available. Heitzberg says if Olive Wagyu were on a restaurant menu, a 16-ounce ribeye steak would cost about the same as top-grade Wagyu, or more than $480. However, Olive Wagyu is almost impossible to get on a constant basis, so it's not exactly sold at restaurants. He says it's basically not available anywhere because of its limited quantity. Heitzberg, who's fluent in Japanese, says it took him 2 years of relationship building to even be capable of importing the meat through Crowd Cow. Since it's pretty difficult to try the steak and explain the taste, we're going to tell you the experience of someone who's put Olive Wagyu to the test. Simon Kim, the owner of Manhattan's Michelin-starred Wagyu beef mecca Cote, where Nate Skitt, who took the steak to be cooked for the taste test, had only heard about Olive Wagyu. "I'm always looking for new beef to bring to the restaurant," Kim said as he observed the inch-thick chunk of meat. "The marbling is beyond sick, and visually it's stunning," he said. The high percentage of oleic acid from the olives, as mentioned earlier, is reportedly what makes Olive Wagyu tastier and more tender than other cuts of also expensive beef. For the taste test, Crowd Cow and Cote gave 3 cuts of 16-ounce ribeye steaks. American Wagyu, which had one side of its lineage is a full-bred Japanese cow, a A5 Japanese Wagyu with the beef being rated from 1 to 5, with 5 being the highest quality, and A corresponds to the amount of edible meat on the animal, and finally A5 Olive Wagyu. Cote's executive chef, David Shim, had cut each of the steaks into 1-inch squares. Then Kim had sprinkled them with sea salt and cooked them over an open flame to a perfect medium-rare steak. According to the article by Nate Skitt, the American Wagyu costs $85 a coat, or around $5 per ounce. Online meat retailer Snake River Farms sells an 8-ounce American Wagyu ribeye steak for $41. The beef sizzled as Kim laid it on the grill and carefully turned it to get a nice char on both sides. The American Wagyu was leaner than the other cuts, so the texture was chewier than what Nate wanted in a steak with Wagyu lineage, as it wasn't so different from other ribeye steaks that you get at most decent steakhouses. The A5 Wagyu, which was priced at $30 per ounce a coat, or the equivalent of just above $14 per ounce on Crowd Cow, had amazing fat marbling according to him. The fat would melt out of the steak as it cooked on the grill. This would make the meat melt in your mouth tender and taste incredibly juicy and buttery. The open flame would create a wonderful crust, giving the exterior a nice crunch. With the meat being so rich, many can't eat a lot of it. Now, coming to the Olive Wagyu. The steak, which would cost about $30 an ounce at a restaurant or around $15 an ounce on Crowd Cow, was soft like the A5 Wagyu and very much tender. Also, the flavor profile was incredibly different. The fat tends to melt in the mouth, which is deeply satisfying and full of that elusive umami flavor, and it has hints of olive oil which is owed to the cow's diet. It also leaves a peppery note in the back of your throat. Kim, who tried all 3 steaks, was impressed by the Olive Wagyu and mentioned that it was very much like beef chocolate, referring to the way the meat melted in his mouth. He said, "You don't even have to chew, the flavor just continuously goes." The fat tastes like gold. According to Nate, the meat is very expensive and is more of a luxury. Spending hundreds of dollars on a single course meal is indeed quite expensive, but it's worth a try at least once. The beef, due to its nature, has certain ways to be prepared. Even defrosting it is different. To defrost A5 Wagyu, you have to first prepare your Wagyu beef properly to enjoy it fully. Then place the cuts you're planning to serve in your fridge for up to 48 hours to allow them to fully defrost. Then take the meat out of the fridge 15 minutes before cooking and allow it to come to room temperature. You should never defrost it at room temperature. This is because the fat in A5 Wagyu has a lower melting point than other beef. Also, you should never put A5 Wagyu in the microwave. Also, there are ways to cook this meat. For bite-sized portions, slice into small strips and cook each one at a time. With A5 Wagyu, a little meat goes a long way, so you can savor and enjoy as you go. For seasoning, sprinkle a little sea salt to taste. Pepper's okay too. Always season lightly so you can enjoy the flavor of the meat itself. Also, you can season after cooking the meat. The choice is up to you. For cooking, you have to cook on stainless steel. First, sear the meat, slicing approximately 1 inch by 4 inches, directly on the hot surface of the pan for 1 to 2 minutes per side. You don't have to add oil whatsoever. The fat from the A5 will melt down and provide more than enough grease for cooking. Japanese A5 Wagyu is cut thinner than what we might be used to. It's about 3/4 of an inch thick for steaks and 1.5 to 2 inches for tenderloin. There's a good reason to cut it thinner. The A5 Wagyu is seriously rich and intense. The thin cuts are also easier to manage and cook. Crowd Cow highly recommends cutting 1 inch by 4 inch strips to sear and serve as you go, progressing your way through the entire steak a little bit at a time so you have time to enjoy each bite. For pairing, light crisp chilled salad greens go really well with Japanese A5 Wagyu. Sautéed root vegetables also make a good pairing. As for beverages, there are no strict rules at all. You can match A5 with anything you love, such as sake, wine, beer, or something else. Whichever will make the experience that much more enjoyable and luxurious. Another thing you can do is to save any fat you trim from your steaks. Chop and use to saute veggies. With that, we're at the end of the video. Would you like to try this super expensive steak? Let us know in the comment section down below. If you found the video interesting, make sure to hit the like button and stay tuned for more videos. See you soon. Until then, bye.